Good evening, and welcome back to the weird and the wonderful with Strange Bones. That's me. And we have been traveling around the world looking at interesting places that have paranormal and supernatural stories about them, looking for those things that are of suitable interest to add to our growing collection of knowledge about such things. And of course, recently we have been looking at voodoo in Haiti and New Orleans, but for today's live, we are going to go to a very different place. Now, if we were to talk about places supernatural, one of the ones that I think is up there at the top is probably Romania. But you may not realize that there are quite a few countries in the Slavic states that are just as strange and have as many interesting stories. Welcome to Change Up There. And for today, we are going to go and look at one of the other states. Now, I think it would be fair to say if you were asked, where is Georgia? You would probably say in the United States, and certainly there is a state in the United States called Georgia. But the Georgia that we are going to be looking at is the original country of Georgia, which existed long before the United States. And we're going to see what we can find of interest there. So welcome if you've just joined us. Stormtrooper Ray and Bert Fented and Palisa and Elise de Lange and Sinisipo Makaola. Welcome, welcome. Glad to have you on board. So remember, of course, like, subscribe, join the channel, share as well. Let's get as many as we can to make this exciting. And remember, we only have one rule for the channel, that you must be polite at least. And if you are not polite to the channel and those that join us, you will of course get the boot. I think it's important that we can freely share opinions and agree and disagree. Absolutely. Hey there, Les. But we can do so in a polite fashion. Just for it to be said. I'm also going to throw it out there just while we are getting started. Don't forget, I also have my other channels at Blackbones124, which is on survival for civilians, if you're interested in such things. But with that said, let us get started and see what we can find to amuse and intrigue ourselves in terms of Georgia. If, of course, you would like at some stage to be a part of the channel, let me know. I have no problem with having people live with me. I enjoy it and do offer such opinions as you might have, and make lots of use of the chat as well. I do believe that the more the merrier. But let us begin with just a tiny touch of history. Just to give us an idea of where we are and what we are going to be able to expect So, Georgia is a country at the intersection of Europe and Asia. It is a former Soviet republic. It is home to the famous Caucasus Mountains and the Black Sea. It's famous for the Vardzia, a sprawling cave monastery from the 12th century. Hopefully, we shall find something there. Um, and it is known for its wine growing in the region of Kakheti. The capital is Tbilisi, and it is a very interesting and very, very old country, which I think will give us plenty to go along with. Now, from what I can see, it's quite a nice sort of a country to visit. It seems to be fairly uh, can we say damp enough that there's plenty of greenery and more. Um, I don't know a great deal about the country more than what I have researched, I must be honest. Um, I don't know the language, so if you are more familiar with it and I mangle it, I will apologize in advance. Um, but there we go. It is considered to be an interesting and beautiful country. So, somewhat mountainous and with a coastline. There you go. And now you know all that I know about Georgia. But let us see what we can find out um, about the weirder things. Hey, Caleb. Welcome, welcome. So, the country, not the US state. Several places in it with intriguing and mysterious histories that are often cited as haunted. Specific ghost stories and local legends do vary, but some of the most talked about locations include a place in Tbilisi, which is called the Devil's House, which sounds promising. There are abandoned sanatoriums in uh, Skaltubo and a culture house in Marani. So there we go. Thank you for the likes there, Sasha. We do enjoy likes. So let's start ourselves off with some interesting spots. So in Tbilisi, the Devil's House. We're going to have to see if we can dig up more on this as we go along, but briefly, it is in Ingorovka Street. It is a 19th century building with a very peculiar design and a large devil like figure carved on its wall, which um, they say that former residents carried out strange rituals in the place, which I think may add to what might be found. Uh, Salku tu Let me try that one again. Sal Skull Tubo is the abandoned sanatorium built in the 1950s that they say have ghosts in. There is the old Chandler Hospital uh, and the Culture House. So, a couple of interesting spots to discuss on our hunt for ghosts and ghost stories. So, the Devil's House, a very fancy building, but yes, on the front wall there is a large and quite well carved devil. Now, why would they have done such a thing? So, the devil like figure carved on its walls that they say looks even creepier after dark. Uh, some say that the house is called the Devil House just because of the carving, but legends say that there are more horrifying reasons. So, I think that might prove to be an interesting one. According to. Hey
Hi,
there. How are you?
good on you.
Good, good, good. Glad you decided to join us for the live.
Yeah, think
Awesome. So, you know how the live works with this?
no, it's my first.
Okay, so basically what we do, and I hope you're interested in such things, we explore the paranormal and the supernatural with the idea of seeing if we can find any kind of logic or maybe even truth to such things. And we go from country to country and culture to culture as well to see if there are commonalities in beliefs. And we've done a few different countries around the world, but for today we are doing Georgia, the country, which is one of the Slavic states in Europe. Do you have any ghost stories, or do you not believe in ghosts?
I do not believe in
You
ghosts.
do not. This is good. It is always good to have an option thereon. So I'm asking not because it is in any way a negative or anything such like that, but are you religious at all?
Yeah,
Okay, so one of the things we have discovered as we've gone around the world is that a great many religions are, shall we say, anti the public having anything to do at all with anything supernatural. They may, in some cases, say, yes, it exists, but don't do anything to do with it. Some deny its existence entirely. So it does lead you to wonder at what the story is and why. And that's one of the reasons for looking at the different things around the world to try to establish what really is the story, and is it something we can completely ignore?
okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any particular opinions on that. Um, if you don't believe in ghosts, then I would say you probably haven't thought about it then, which is of course fine. I dear, it seems it's not for him. Alas, that's a pity because he's a great guy, and you must definitely go and join his channel. He's a good fellow indeed. Um, but as we go, hey Caleb. Um, so we're talking about the Devil House, which is quite a creepy spot, and it say that the house was constructed under the orders of an Armenian merchant who, they say, how true it is, of course, is not fully established, but they say was involved in Satanism and mysticism. And he allegedly used to carry out rituals in the house. They say that the house has an underground secret tunnel where one could get through the chimney into and out wherever. Now, all of these theories, stories, and myths were strengthened by the fact, and this is a fact, that an Armenian woman hung herself in the garden. She was believed to either be the wife or the daughter of the merchant. Some people still claim that you can hear voices coming from the house and that they have seen items moving, but there is no clear evidence to prove this. And moreover, it's thought by many that there are several such spooky houses in the city that, if you join them together, form a pentagram. And indeed, around the city, the sort of devil motif does appear on a couple of houses. So perhaps this is true. And I dare say, hey, one and only, um, I dare say that this has added to the legends. Now, as we know, people do love legends, and certainly they elaborate on them. Um, and it is said that, in fact, these ones might not be true. They say that, in fact, the devil on the wall is not a devil at all, but Pan, the god of the wild. Though why would somebody put that on their wall? Um, and of course, Pan, as we know, comes from Greek mythology. An interesting fact about the building that um, built in the 19th century by the Tbilisi-based Polish architect Alexander Sienkiewicz is the author of a number of unique buildings in the city, including the Supreme Court of Georgia, the Conservatoria building of the Caucasian Silk Station, Andrea Lotti's house, Rustave's theatre, and the Furniture building. So there's a lot of stories that may or may not be true. But as we say, we do know that a woman committed suicide by hanging in the garden at the very least. So there is that going for it. The house belonged to a very wealthy man who had tennis courts and more. Um, and he even had his own car, which back in the day was um, a very rare thing for a lot of people. So the stories have grown and carried on, and they say that the house these days is empty. Nobody is ever in, but you will see lights flickering in certain windows, um, figures walking past the windows, and more. And you wonder if there is any truth in the story. We know, of course, from previous examinations of what causes ghosts, that it takes trauma and extreme emotion. Of course, suicide is absolutely a prime reason for there to be um, a great deal of trauma. So perhaps the stories are more true than people want them to be. Hey, Zella Babe, welcome, welcome. Now, there are in Georgia quite a few abandoned houses like this. Um, it seems that this is not uncommon at all. Um, the Cinema Apollo in Tbilisi as well, um, built in 1909, and is an absolutely stunning example of Art Nouveau architecture. In the Soviet era, it was called the October, but it gained its old name in the 90s after Georgia became independent, the Apollo. And it absolutely does have some of the most beautiful decorations around, but abandoned as it is, they say you can sometimes still hear music played um, and the sounds of people within the walls, um, which certainly makes it interesting. There are no stories that I could find specifically of particular ghosts, but nevertheless, um, an interesting thing indeed. Now, the next spot, as we know, if you want to find ghosts, the top three locations are going to be hospitals, battlefields, and roads. And the next spot is indeed the Old Candler Hospital in Savannah. It is the oldest hospital, they say. built in 1804. There we go. Sorry, I had a minor hiccup with my delightful computer, but it's popped back. Um, it is recognized as the second oldest continuously operating hospital, but alas, now is in ruins, and it's one of those places that has within it a very spooky aura the moment you enter the premises. Um, the tour into the premises will take you past a 330-year-old tree, an oak tree called the Hanging Tree. And they say that there are all kinds of stories about ghosts being seen hanging from the branches in the dead of night, um, which I think is quite an interesting story indeed. Now, looking at some comments and stories that people have shared, which of course would be a little bit more modern, uh, there is a Georgian resident that says, the most haunted thing I saw happened when I got lost around the city of Georgia. There was this elderly woman dressed all in black with a black cat next to her, and I thought she looked really sort of witchy and ascetic, so I took a picture of her without her noticing, but the cat did. And as I walked past her, the cat uh, made noises, and suddenly she looked up at me and said in Georgian, "The next time you want a photograph, you have to pay." Now, he says that she was actually looking in the opposite direction when they took the picture. Um, so there's no ways that she could have known, but perhaps she was not so much a ghost as a witch with her familiar. Uh, who's to say? Um, they say there is one street. Um, these are stories from various people. Um, there's one street, and every time they and their classmate got there when returning from school, it was very, very silent. The birds did not sing in the street. There were no sounds coming from the street itself, and random anomalies would always seem to happen. Um, Once an old woman felt ill somewhere nearby, and we told her that we would take her home, and she took us to that road, and there was a store there that looked abandoned with mannequins inside, and she opened the window, thanked them, and crawled in through the window, and then invited them in for tea. Um, they were not quite so courageous and declined, but they realized that there were a lot of 666s written on the walls and the trees there, and strange random sounds that they've never heard anywhere else. And the few people that they saw seemed old fashioned, and even the toys and bikes that the kids had were like not quite from modern times. And they say that once you got out of the street, the world would suddenly become loud and noisy again, and it was as if this street existed in a completely different time. And who's to say? It seems that parts of Georgia are very, very strange. Back in the day during the Soviet era, there were obviously a number of issues with the NKVD and stories of, but things that really happened with tortures and killings. Um, and the result is actually the one person gives a warning to say, be very careful of Georgian ghosts, as by and large, the spirits there are not happy at all. So you may take it under advisement. Um, they say that one of the best haunted houses in Tbilisi is one that they lived in. I grew up in the house which is located in a building with apartments, and their apartment was appropriately numbered number 13. And they said they always knew that ghosts were there, but this was because you feel that the house itself breathes. And if you stayed there alone, you would hear these incredible silences. And then after some time, knocking and voices. And it was the kind of place that could drive a person crazy. Um, and they said that they were very, very glad when they moved. They also said that there is a tree outside of Sabertalo where it's what they call a pagan witch tree, and bones have been discovered underneath it. And it's a sort of place that most people don't talk much about at all. They just say, don't go there. Um, it's not the kind of thing that you really want to uh, spend too much time in, which I think is a fair comment indeed. Now, another story that came out, which again is fairly modern. Um, in fact, it was put up in 2024, and the guy begins by saying, I know you might think I'm crazy or something or hallucinating, but one of the last apartments that I rented was absolutely haunted. And they say they would hear whispers late at night. The temperature would suddenly drop at certain spots in the apartment, and shadowy figures could be seen moving around at times. Uh, there were days when suddenly and for no reason they would become very ill, and they they're obviously a fairly sensible person in that they say, look, I realize that it could be because it's an old building due to the pipes or leaks or something, but they say that the things that they experienced were very strange in that it only ever seemed to happen during the night. And no matter how much they tried, they could never manage to light up the entire apartment property. There were always dark spots, uh, and whenever the landlord would come and change the light bulbs and things, within a day or so, those bulbs would go out as if something wanted a certain amount of dark for them. So certainly it became something of an issue. And they said, look, just practically, um, it became an issue, and they had to leave uh, and move somewhere else. But they say that they explained to their friends some of their experiences and what had happened, and yet nobody would believe them. And they say it to be fair, because why would you? Why would you believe such things? But they said, nevertheless, despite nobody believing them, it it seems that they did find a number of other people who also stayed in similar type apartments, many of them carryovers from the Soviet era, um, and other people said they experienced exactly the same things. Now, of course, we can take from this a number of things. The fact that it is said that the paranormal can affect electrical systems, so that seems to be true. They have mentioned cold spots, which, as we have discovered, seems to be because ghosts require energy to do things and to appear. So they experienced that. They experienced shadowy figures moving around as well. So not quite apparitions, but certainly halfway there. And that fits in with many of these stories we have from a lot of other cultures and places. So absolutely as well. So their tale is filling in on a lot of what we already do know about ghosts. So it seems that more confirmation, as it were. Now, an interesting comment, however, which perhaps you agree with and perhaps you don't, um, hey Saviour, is that it is very common among Georgians that whenever they move into a new place, they will have the place consecrated by a priest, and they say that it's such a common thing that even places like casinos or even strip clubs will first get the place consecrated by a priest in case that there is something that has carried over. So an interesting comment there. And of course, as we know, a lot of people will tell you straight away that a blessing is important and can um, keep away issues of hauntings and paranormals. Um, and in fact, the guy that wrote the story was questioned by a number of the people on his post, pointing out that maybe it was faulty wiring and more. And he replied and said, actually, yes, they had done exactly that. It was the first thing that they got suspicious of, and they had someone come and check it properly and make sure that everything was working properly. And they did this more than once over the time. But the strange things and problems just got more and more, even though it was certified as being great. Um, and eventually they just said thanks but no and kicked out. I can't say I blame them. I think it's quite possible um, that I too would nope out of that one. Now, what is Georgia uh, quite like in that regard? Um, are there many abandoned buildings and empty places? And according to these stories, The area around the place was known for being very, very popular along the coast, which, as we know, is onto the Black Sea, um, by whalers. And many of the settlements that built up our former whaling stations. Some of them, however, during the Great Depression, um, are now completely abandoned, as, of course, nowadays there is no whaling really permitted, and of course, the Great Depression stopped it being a profitable thing. So you have not just houses, but even towns that are somewhat abandoned, such as Whalers Bay, Grytviken, Hustvik, Leith Harbour, the Ocean Harbour, Prince Olav Harbour, and Stromness, all of which seem to be places that there's just nobody much there around. An interesting thing about Stromness, it's an abandoned whaling station that, in fact, was the destination of Sir Ernest Shackleton, his rescue journey in 1916. So we know Shackleton was trying to get to the North Pole, but had issues along the way, and they had to give up on that. But there are a number of different places which these days are simply abandoned. Um, there are also a number of very old uh, ruins, such as Armazi, um, which is about 4 kilometers from Mecheka, about 22 kilometers north of Tbilisi, and it's part of a very historical area where an ancient city and the original capital of the Georgian kingdom of Kartli was originally located, and it flourished in the very early centuries AD and was destroyed in the 730s by an Arab invasion, um, which gives you an idea of how old it is. But the ruins remain, and there have been, of course, archaeological excavations and more there. Um, and it is still going on, of course. And they say that there are several cultural layers to this place. Um, so different times that people used the place with slightly different levels of importance, which of course is a very interesting thing. And they say that it was dedicated originally to the Zoroastrian um, god of Aru Mazda, which was said possibly to have derived from the Indian god, the Vedic god Arma, which is the moon god in Sanskrit. And indeed, there are a number of moon god relics found around in the city, which certainly makes for an interesting place. Um, so it's got quite a serious history um, in that regard, and it's even mentioned by great recorders of history such as Strabo, Pliny, Ptolemy, and Dio Cassius, and more. Um, it was founded back in the 3rd century by King Parnavas the First, back when it was called Iberia, um, and the fortress on the modern day Mount Bagnetti on the river there was used as the fortress opposite the city, so to speak. So there's huge amounts of history, and with the attacks on varying places back and forth and battles that have been fought, um, it has a lot that we can say is there to be fertile ground for hauntings. The city was finally destroyed and razed to the ground by the Arab commander Marwan ibn Muhammad, who later became the Umayyad Caliph. Um, so it is no longer, of course, the capital of Georgia, and it has never been revived as a city since 736 when it was wiped out. But the Georgian Orthodox monastery of St. Nino was constructed there between 1150 and 1178. And now it is also in ruins, but some of its 12th century murals have survived. And they say around there you may well encounter paranormal activity, that the ancient history and things that have occurred there um, have left its mark upon the landscape of this uh, ancient city. Hey, Nadine. Um, so old battles and older ghosts, very old ghosts, seeing as nobody has really lived there. Hey, Logan, since the year 700 odd. Now, as we go along and look around, we we see that in the country in Europe, there was in the 1990s quite a turbulent period with political instability, a lot of organized crime. There was the war in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and these things have left their scars upon the country. And as we have said, a number of abandoned towns like Akamara and Ochamchira um, that were caused due to conflict and ethnic cleansing, which is always one of those terrible situations that can lead to, shall we say, a lot more um, ghostly activity in that regard. Um, so certainly there are those sides to all the stories. It's a little bit difficult to find things on Georgia in general because every time you do, um,
Many countries' borders make sense.
you end up with links that immediately send you to um, the American Georgia, which makes it difficult because you have to be quite careful not to cross over. Um, but besides its ghosts, of which they say there are plenty, and certainly with the instability and difficulties that have happened there, they also have a number of what we shall call cryptids that fit to um, the paranormal type things that we are talking about. And the first one is an interesting one. It's called a chinka. It is a pagan creature from ancient Georgian mythology, said to inhabit remote villages and wooded areas. It preys on human beings. The creature is, in and of itself, not specifically male or female. It can be either or. Um, there are places where your woodland sort of creatures are specifically one gender or another. These ones, it seems, are not. They fit the role of the thing in the woods, as it were. I believe in Germany you will find in the Black Forest you have a creature called a Schrat, but those are all female. But in Georgia, the Chinka can be male or female. An interesting creature, nevertheless. They also have the Ali, which is a demon similar to the legends of Lilith, particularly interested in attacking pregnant women, the elderly, and infants who wander in remote areas. There are the Devi, which are many headed ogres with regenerating heads similar to the idea of a hydra. There are the Doblini, which are disease spreading spirits that seems can shapeshift and appear as women, children, or animals. There is the Gveleshapi, an evil serpent that lives in lakes, rivers, and other water sources, um, and seems to fit the role of Nessie. There are the Kaji, a race of spirits portrayed as magic wielding demonic metalworkers. And this might be the link that we are looking for in terms of what we have been referring to as the jinn. And then you have the Kudiani, a type of hideous hunchbacked witch with a tail. So let's see what we can say about all of these things. Um, there are a great many influences, of course, over the centuries from the indigenous Caucasian ethnic group that lived there. Now, just in case you are wondering, these days when you speak of Caucasians, you mean white people. Uh, in this instance, we mean the ethnic groups from around the Caucasus Mountains. So, not quite the same thing, in case you are wondering. Um, they were influenced, of course, by the ancient Greeks, the Iranians, the Vinyak peoples, um, the Scythians and Sarmatians, and of course, they have a lot of influence from the Zoroastrian religion of the ancient Persians. Um, so their mythology and legends are quite various, but very much popular still in Georgia and are quite well preserved, they say, um, which is good for us. There is also, of course, a certain degree of Christianization that occurred, which also had a big effect on how things were viewed. But it seems that while it worked in some parts of Georgia, it didn't in others. Um, and at different times. And pagan beliefs and practices still to this day are found. So there's a whole lot of stories around that. They have their own version of a witch there, which we will not go into too much because we are saving it for when we go and look at witchcraft and such around the world. But they have their versions, a kind of a shaman type person, the Kadagi, um, which uh, becomes possessed by one of the spirits or minor divinities uh, in order to become a shaman. They are permanently possessed once that has happened. Um, and they apparently would have the ability to foretell the future and do various other things as well. So we have that. Now, they had several gods. The religion is not monotheistic. You have the Adgilis Deda, you have the Aina and Daina, uh, the Elia, and more. So, gods that are for fertility, livestock, um, of birds and animals, gods of thunder, gods of blacksmithing, and more. So, plenty of gods that connect to a varied selection of things in society that were believed in. I'm not sure how widespread these deities are still today, but certainly it's recorded, which is a good thing. You also had a number of demigods, which is not unlike the Greek view of things, where you have gods, but also great heroes that sort of fit a halfway role. People like Ameran, uh, Iaxar, and so forth. Good, good stories and legends uh, that form the basis for a lot of the old tales that are quite popular. But our type of things that we are looking for today, which I think are of interest unto us, are of course the spirits, creatures, and other beings. So let's see what we had. We mentioned there is the Ali, which is a Lilith like demon affecting pregnant women, the elderly, and infants who stumble into remote woods, caves, and ruins. Alith can be male or female creatures, um, though females are sometimes known as alkali. Um, and the males appear monstrous and horrifying, while females can shift between awful hag like ugliness or incredibly seductive beauty. The name might, and here is another point of interest, might be related to the word for flame. And this creature, therefore, might very well, in fact, be related to the jinn, who, as we know, are creatures of fire, just as humans are supposed to be creatures of earth. So it seems that they have got their version of the jinn right there. The next interesting creature that they have is called the dive, the many-headed ogres whose heads can regenerate if any of them are cut off. These are a malevolent giant that live mostly in the underworld or in remote mountains where they hoard treasure and keep their captives. In Georgian mythology, they live in a family consisting usually of 9 brothers, with the strongest being the most powerful. And in these stories, heroes had to outwit them by various means of trickery. So it fits to the idea. The next interesting creature is the Dobilni, um, which translates to the ones who became sisters, which is an interesting thing. They are disease spreading spirits that appear in different forms, and there are shrines and uh, what they call shrines and towers that are built um, in order to um, keep them at bay. They say that some dobilni are benevolent, such as the Princess Samzimar in one of the legends, who is often invoked for assistance in childbirth and healthy children and women's health. Um, so they have shrines for these creatures, especially when they are good ones, but do not believe that all of them are in any manner or form good. You then have the Gvelashapi, which broadly translates to a snake whale. It is an evil serpent-like creature that lives in various water sources. Um, they are associated with water-related disasters and often appear in heroic tales as well. But of course, they fit just fine to the Nessie legends. So a large reptilian creature in a water source that is still remembered. You then get the Kaji, which is a race of spirits that I wanted to know a lot more about, related to metalworking and more. Um, They live in Kajeti and had magical powers that they used against humans. Land Kajis were malevolent, while river and lake Kajis are considered friendly. Female Kajis are very beautiful, and they either seduced heroes or helped them, and they appear quite prominently in the Shota Rustaveli's Vipkiskeosani, in which the Kajis abduct a princess and fight the heroes that go to rescue them. Um, they are mostly seen as a kind of supernatural being. However, some say that in fact, no, they are a tribe of human wizards, uh, but it seems that it's a little bit difficult, and it does depend on who you ask and where you go. Um, but they are very much a strong part of the hero type stories, which is quite interesting. Hey, Makwetsi, welcome, welcome. Glad to have you back. I hope you are very well. Now, as we said, you get witches in all over the place, and you do here, though we won't go too much into them because we are saving them for another set of stories. But you do get the Kudiani, a kind of hunchbacked witch with large teeth and a tail. And indeed, her name is derived from that. They can disguise themselves as humans in order to bewitch them, and they have quite a lot of powers, including the leader, Rokap, can summon a special mountain up where they hold a festival similar to the European Walpurgisnacht, which is quite a story. Matsil are evil spirits from the underworld that plague travelers and hunters, and again, considered to be quite difficult to deal with. And then in the mountain regions of East Georgia, you get something which is kind of a ghost, the Ngibri, the spirit of a dying person. Um, a dying person's male relative. Okay, so got to get this in the right order because it's a ghost that the male relative of a person who is currently dying is sent from the afterlife back to be to the mortal world to be the first to greet the dying family member when they pass. Normally, this Ngibri will be the person's close family member, very often the mother's brothers, and they appear as young men um, in varying ways, and they are there to lead you to the afterlife, the spirit world, or the deceased person will not be able to enter it. You may make of that what you will. Then you have the Ochokochi, a forest being in Mingrelian folklore that comes into conflict with hunters. Um, Instead of being the hairy type, he has a horn on his chest, which he uses to kill passers-by by embracing them. He often pursues the queen of the forest out of lust, but his uncouth advances are just as often thwarted by mortal hunters, and the hero that protects the queen of the forest from this creature is often well rewarded. They also have the Paskunji, which is a phoenix-like being. So we have phoenixes here as well as in other countries, and he is supposed to be fairly benevolent, where he lives in the underworld and fights the serpents there. Heroes summoned him by burning one of his feathers, and he could transport them to other places, heal wounds and illnesses, and more. But sometimes, if you are not good to them, they can turn quite hostile. You also have a thing which, if you know it from the Greek legends, you would call a Pegasus, which in Georgia is called the Rashi, a magical winged horse. Now, we haven't done Greece yet, but we will in due course, perhaps next one. But we know about the winged horse. But the Rashi in this particular area comes in three types. Land Rashis are well disposed towards people and can see the future. Sea Rashis are hostile, but they can take a human to the bottom of the sea safely, and their milk was believed to cure many illnesses. And then you get heavenly Rashis, which have wings and breathe fire and are very difficult to subdue. But if you tame one, it becomes very, very loyal to you. Hell of a ride. Now, Rokap, which we have mentioned as the leader of the witches, is an evil spirit, and he was punished by the god, yeah, by chaining him to a column under the earth, where he devours human hearts that are brought to him. And every year he tries to free himself, and thus far he has always failed. The Tkashmempa is a forest entity, appearing as a pale woman with very long white hair and a white dress. She is very strong as well as vicious and violent when displeased. She seeks out men but has a preference for virgin lads to take as her lovers. But should it be that you refuse, she will wreak havoc upon you. So, quite a few quite unique cryptids there, though some we have come across. The Alti, for example, is the sea monster, and it is a very, very old story. This creature is much, basically, it's the same as Loch Ness, and it even looks a heck of a lot like the depictions of the Loch Ness Monster. And basically, the idea is that the Alti is your prehistoric cryptid that comes from memories of old dinosaurs. Now, in Fannin County, you get fairy crosses. No, we're not jumping across to there just yet. So we are going to skip on them and go to some of the other stories that we have. See what more that we can discover thereon. Now, the sanatoriums of Tsalktubo. Let us see what we can find there. Now, these are, as I say, abandoned places, which may or may not also have more to them. In Tbilisi is the Geophysical Observatory, opened in Karsan in 1904, a complex of several buildings, the main buildings and several small surrounding ones, with the geophysics laboratory that functioned until 1935, when the department was moved to Dusheti. It is said during World War II, under the leadership of Lavrenti Beria, physicists were working on secret weapons here. And this comes from people who actually were there at the time. So it seems that it was very true. The site was given over to archaeologists after the war, and later it was turned into a tuberculosis hospital. But today, the building is half destroyed and is actually quite dangerous physically to go into, with nature slowly taking over it. But what with its weird setup and various connections, it is said that it is absolutely indeed haunted, and you might find very strange sounds echoing around the halls. Quite an interesting one. Another rather interesting thing that, to me at least, is quite fascinating is the military hospital in Shovi. And the reason I find it interesting is that it's built entirely out of wood, which is not a thing I know from my country at all, really. It was built during the Soviet era under Stalin with 3 floors, and it's quite an amazing place. But of course, as a wooden structure and now abandoned, it's quite dangerous to visit. But like all hospitals, it is said that those that died there during World War II, their ghosts still haunt the halls. What with the stories we have seen and the legends, at least, of the varying ghosts, it's clear that there's a lot going on in Georgia. Wonderful sort of places in that regard. But very sketchy, alas, on detail as to what might be out there and what we can expect to find. And I think that in many ways, um, it makes it difficult to really um, say much about them, which I would absolutely like to know more. Some places, it seems, record quite a lot, and some of them simply don't. You get tiny little hints of things that might be there, and I suppose in many ways the only real way to um, get much at all is to go yourself. If you add the fact that it keeps getting mixed up by the internet with Georgia in the US of A, it makes it very difficult to find a lot um, to really talk about. Um, they 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 have said at least that there are a few spots that can be visited. Um, they say that the capital city, being as new as it is, um, hasn't got that much going for it, simply because um, it hasn't been around long enough for there to be, perhaps. Um, the war has left enough scarrings to um, allow for the ghosts. Hey there, Noodle and Cullen Zedits. It's awesome to have you guys back with us. Um, of the darker things to find in Tbilisi itself, there are a few things in terms of some of the monuments, at least. Um, there was a large hunger strike that took place demanding independence from the Soviet Union. And in response to the hunger strike, um, the Soviet troops in 1989 shot 20 of them. Um, in 1991, the then President Ziad, I'm not even going to try his surname, had to flee the besieged parliament building during the so-called uh, attacks. And then in 2003, which is pretty damn recent, really, you had the Rose Revolution. So things are quite new, shall we say, and heavily influenced by Soviet era in that regard. So still struggling through a lot of stuff. But besides that, we can at least go to some of the other older cities, such as Stepankert. Uh, a lot of the things that do talk anything at all about um, places around uh, are not in English, which makes it a little hard for me, I have to be honest. Um, so there is a certain amount of limit to what I can even tell you about the place. But what I can say in Georgia that gives you a certain amount of uh, interest, if you will, which they say may have some kind of hauntings and more around. Hey, Jeff, if you go to Georgia, you do kind of need to see what um, they have done in their cave building. It is apparently something with a centuries old history, and this style of construction developed in Georgia uh, in many interesting ways, but which took tons of labor, where the caves are actually carved into the rocks. Um, Georgia, being a country with many high mountains and cliffs and such, is ideal. And temples, fortresses, and even entire cities have been carved into the rocks. Um, and if you go to, and I'm going to try just for you guys, um, Uplisfike, the cave city there, or the monastery complex of David Gareji. Um, it's well worth seeing, at least. I'm being joined by the cat, who has elected to grace me with her pleasant and at least this time not stand on the keyboard, which is quite good. Um, they say it's well worth seeing these caves, and some of them are remarkably old as well, which means that the ones that you get to see may well have more to them than is otherwise apparent. They say that their age alone has made some of them to be haunted, but again, quite frustratingly, they tell us so little about most of the stories we have received about hauntings in Georgia are modern rather than old. The cryptid stories, absolutely, you have a lot thereof. Hey, Tamsin. Um, but in terms of the other things, it's mere mention and not much more. So I don't quite know what to tell you in terms of what to expect from them, except that from the stories we have seen, the view of ghosts, at least, is exactly in line of um, what we have seen in just about every other country. That for there to be ghosts, you absolutely do need a lot of tragedy, and there has been, of course, in Georgia. It is fairly new as an independent country, despite its great age, in the modern era at least. They have added nothing particular in terms of what we've found. Um, the ghosts create cold spots, can affect electricity, can move things, it seems. And at least according to the reports of the more modern storytellers about hauntings, Georgian ghosts are generally very angry because of what has happened. So perhaps it is the sort of place that, unless you are a brave ghost hunter, you should not go there. In terms of the cryptids, I find it very interesting that they have an equivalent of Nessie, which we have found in many places. They have the jinn equivalent as well, which absolutely we have found in many places as well. They do not have a Bigfoot type creature, despite the fact we have found a version in a great many places. And you would think that this sort of environ would suit Bigfoot quite well. It's wet enough at the very least. We know that the Bigfoot types do not like desert for whatever reason. Maybe there's something to know in that. Um, but the jinn type creatures absolutely fit exactly to all we have heard and found about them, no matter which country we have gone to, that they are somewhat magical. They seem to be able to slip between worlds in some form or another, that some of them can be quite nice if they want to be, and some of them can be quite nasty. They are viewed more as a spirit in Georgia, which in most other places are often not. They are definitely not ghosts. Excuse me. So we have that going for it. But along with that, I don't know, do you guys have any comments to send up? Any stories to share with us? Do, of course, like, subscribe, um, and do all the good things that make it possible for us to keep the channel going. I must admit, it's a very cold night tonight. It's turned quite chilly here, and I see that a great many people that normally join us have not joined us tonight and are missing out. So perhaps that tells you something. While cold spots might be suitable to ghosts, they are absolutely not suitable to me, at the very least. Um, so we've had confirmation on our ghosts, but no new. On our cryptids, there are a lot of new, unique ones, um, which, of course, we tend to see as being the sort of um, the sort of thing that usually fit to our categories of moral story type or warning type cryptids. Stories told to stop you doing certain things or going certain places, rather than something that people see as a realistic type creature to be afraid of. Unlike Bigfoot, which seems to not fit to stories per se, but be a thing that is a creature out there, um, which perhaps defines the difference in certain respects. I was quite surprised to note that, unlike a number of the Slavic states, there are no particular stories of undead at all. There appear to be no vampires, there appear to be no ghouls, there appear to be no zombies. And I wonder why that is. Why that does not seem to feature at all in Georgian mythology or stories or even urban legends. And perhaps if somebody knows the answer to that, they can send it to me. But I must admit, I absolutely don't know. I was somewhat surprised at that when I discovered it. But yes, and with that, we have come to the end of our look at Georgia, a little shorter and in some ways a little disappointing. I would have thought there'd be a lot more there than actually turned out. But as I say, it was a very difficult place to research. There is not much at all said. So we shall see. But what with all of that done and said, I am going to end there. As we have had no comments or questions from people, which is quite sad. We have had good old Jeff stick by us for a while to listen, and I hope that he and all of you enjoyed very much this one. Remember that we will get together at 10 o'clock South African time, that is GMT, plus 2 hours, pretty much every night, except not on a Sunday. and we shall see what there is to see. So, thank you for joining us and for being a part of the event. Do join us again, and remember, we always like to have likes, subscribes, join the fan club, be a part of keeping the channel going. And if you have any questions, do let me know. And if you have any particular things, if we haven't already done it, particular places or countries you would like looked at, do let me know, and I will do my best to see what I can bring forward. But until then, I shall bid you all good night, and sleep sweet and sleep deep. But remember, sleep with one eye open just in case. Keep a holy object near at hand, um, and remember that sometimes those things that go bump in the night may quite possibly go bump for you.